I can't hear you guys. I don't know if you can hear me.
I
Sorry.
can hear you.
Okay. I can hear you too, Peter.
Brian's muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Awesome.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Ready, let's start over. Welcome back to the Peruvian Waltz podcast. I'm your host, Brian Birdie, joining you here from Lima, Peru. And I'm here with the usual two panelists, Christopher and Peter. Firstly, Peter, the usual. How are you, Peter?
Yeah, doing well, Brian. Thank you. Loaded show today. I'm not going to waste any time. Let's just get right through these introductions as quickly as we can, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose so. And like last time, and who's going to become a usual in the show, or like Peter would say, a fixture, Christopher Ricardo. How are you, Christopher?
Pretty good. I guess we have a lot to talk about, so let's go right on.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so I guess we can get started. Firstly, let's mention something brief, something that came up relatively earlier today. That's even a term how you could put it. But yeah, Piero Vivanco from EGB has joined Huachipato. He was on trial, and Peter is a big fan of his. So we'll let Peter talk about him quickly before I ask my question to all you guys.
Yeah, Piero Vivanco is a player from EGB, as you mentioned, Este Grande de Pentin. Just turned 18 years old. Brian and I went to a Copa Federación match featuring EGB and La U's under 18s. And Vivanco caught both of our eye. And because I was there in Lima, I decided to write a scouting report on Vivanco. And he caught my eye just simply because even though when he was younger, he was deployed as a false nine, he was deployed in more of a playmaker number 8 role as well in this match. And it seems like that is his position of choice these days. And he was just so silky smooth on the ball. His technique was great. The vision was impeccable. Took him a little while to grow into the game, which kind of is a bit of an issue for a lot of young players, just getting that consistency throughout the 90 minutes. But he was a player who was on a lot of clubs' radars when he was younger because he was with Peru's under 15s. A couple of clubs were looking at him. He even trialed with a couple as well. And Huachipato brought him in on a trial recently, and clearly they liked him enough to sign him permanently. So we'll see how he does, but he could be one to watch for the future depending on how his development goes over the next couple of years.
For sure. And now the thing that kind of bugged me about this move, like I'm happy he moved to Chile. I'm happy he moved abroad. But it kind of bugged me that Peruvian clubs don't really scout EGB much, or even Cantolao had this problem before they moved to the Primera División. Well, Claudio Pizarro, he played in Alianza, yeah, sure. Although he was many years ago, so I'm not going to claim. Carlos Zambrano is a better example. And then there's Renato Tapia. There's even Pierre Larrauri didn't even start his career in Peru. He started in Bayern Munich, and then he went to Leicester City. So do you think that Peruvian clubs could benefit more from scouting these clubs, or do you think that these clubs are scouted more by international teams, or should Peruvian clubs? And do you think this should will that be a benefit, or we prefer the current way it's happening to keep happening? That makes sense.
Well, first of all, EGB has a pretty good track record of developing youngsters. And they're in a lot of these teams' backyards, right? I mean, they play against them in Copa Federación, other competitions. It is a bit strange that more Peruvian clubs don't look for these players or scout these players. Because, look, Brian, if you and I can notice them, and if other clubs around can notice them, like obviously Tapia, as you mentioned, Carrillo, Vivanco, it should be obvious to these clubs that, hey, we could use some younger Peruvian players, especially with the Bolsa de Minutos rule. Why not take it from this academy that clearly has a strong pedigree of developing some quality youngsters? It does make no sense. On one hand, you like to see these players getting opportunities wherever it happens to be, as long as, of course, they're playing regularly. That is the main key here. But on the other, from a Peruvian football perspective, it could certainly help, and in just improving the quality, giving these young players a chance, because even though you might want the quality of the league to improve, I'm sure on the other hand, you also want to see some young Peruvians getting opportunities, well, more so than they are now. And certainly by looking at not just EGB, but other clubs like them, that could certainly help.
Yeah, definitely. Before we move on to our first topic, because that was just kind of brief, Christopher, do you have anything to add to this, to that question in particular?
Well, no, I think I would agree with what Peter said. I mean, like, honestly, Cantolao especially, before arriving to the first division, they were always known as the club that was not so much about professional soccer, but more about that youth talent. And I think we have seen that they have a pretty competitive academy. I mean, how many big stars started at Cantolao? How many have those pictures of them as 4, 5, 6-year-olds with their Cantolao jerseys on?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I had never thought about that, about the fact that in fact we have a Bolsa de Minutos, and the Bolsa de Minutos, like for example, this year just got bigger, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, these clubs should be even more important now to Peruvian soccer. Even though I think there's always going to be the argument in Peruvian soccer on whether it is more beneficial for a youngster to stay home, develop, or to leave early, kind of Paolo Guerrero style, and develop abroad, like their final years per se. So yeah, I don't know if the argument is settled either way.
Yeah, totally agreed. I am. Some people here in Peru complaining about the Bolsa Minutos, saying that some people are taking advantage of it, but I like it a lot. I think it's I think it's helped show some new youngsters some new minutes. If you impress in those 60 minutes, they're gonna give you. They're gonna probably start you at some point. So I think it's a good rule to have. I think it enforces teams to actually play the young players and develop them. And yeah, don't be like Mexico where they just take away the form rule completely and they just like hinder any chance of new youngsters coming through. So that's one thing. So let's move on to the first topic, the Copa Libertadores. We kind of forgot to mention this last week, but we're here this week. We're only a day late, so it's not worry. First, we're going to talk about the game yesterday. Universitario lost 2-0 to Oriente Petrolero in Santa Cruz de Bolivia, which no excuse there. There's no altitude. Sure, they're a big club in Bolivia, but the La U should have done better there. Like, they just played an awful, awful game. So I'll get to you guys. Christopher, what were your thoughts on the game?
Well, first of all, in Bolivian clubs' defense, I think we have this mentality that Bolivian clubs are supposed to be worse than Peruvian clubs. Peruvian clubs are supposed to be better, but honestly, we're seeing a regular pattern of Bolivian clubs coming to Lima and playing amazing games. Like for example, the strongest last year comes to mind. And I mean, also we know that this is a Universitario side that's really weak, especially with all the injuries that they had. Only days ago, basically. But even then, I don't know if they had all their players, right? If everybody had been in tip-top shape, still we know with the youngsters and whatnot, it was going to be hard, and it's just sad. It's honestly sad, and it's kind of scary. I mean, I still wish Universitario the best, but yeah, unfortunately, to me, that was a pretty sad game.
Yeah, and as I said, Pablo de la Cruz impressed. Sucho then impressed, but I still have faith in him. I still think that he's gonna have a good year. But some of these youngsters impressed. But one thing I said in my preview in the Peruvian Waltz website, I said that La U can't expect these youngsters to be awesome in the first few matches. Like some of them might be, some of them might not be. But this is it's a rare situation where you're gonna play youngsters, they're gonna be awesome immediately. So even the La Cruz last night, who was close to awesome, but he wasn't quite there yet. The second half kind of disappeared, and he missed a few chances. So I'm gonna put him in there, but it's his first match, so you can't really blame him for it. It's his competitive debut, anyways. Peter, what were your thoughts on the match and De La Cruz overall? I bring up De La Cruz because he's on everyone's lips right now. So. Oh
yeah. Yeah, he was on everybody's lips on Twitter as well last night, especially in that first half. He was making things happen. I'll start with him first. Completely agreed. Dominant first half. Second half faded a lot, but then again, so did the Universitario attack and the team in general. They were terrible while up a man, which you wouldn't necessarily expect. But then De La Cruz, I think rightfully so, struggled. And it's his competitive debut. Oriente probably realized, hey, this kid is torching us. We should probably try to close him down quicker. And they did. And he couldn't really flourish all that much. Kudos to him because he was taking foul after foul and getting up and shaking it off. And young players are going to deal with that. They're probably going to drift in and out of games. It's important for him to just grab that consistency. I've said it time and time again. That is the last step in a player's development, but it's the toughest. If he can master that, he'll be well on his way. In terms of Universitario's performance as a whole, there's really nothing to say. It was disappointing because they also had their chances in the first half to score, but they only had one shot on target. They would take too long to score. They would be a little indecisive in the box. They were getting great luxury down the right-hand side, but outside of De La Cruz, no one really created quality chances for the strikers, and Chavez was isolated. I thought Benincasa had a great match at the back. I think once he came out, the defense was a lot more prone to, well, not just Oriente's counterattack, but just errors individually. Raul Fernandez's handling is terrible. Not that we're learning anything new about that. It wasn't a clean performance, and the chances were there, and that's what's unfortunate. That's what makes me have a little bit of confidence going into the second leg, but it's going to be difficult to both score a couple of goals and then prevent Oriente from scoring on the counterattack because Ronaldo Sanchez especially was causing them problems on the break.
Okay, well, I'm actually going to the game on Friday, so I'll update on Twitter about how that is. But the question here is, do you guys think Lau could turn this around? I'll start with Peter.
They certainly can. I don't think they will, for the reasons I mentioned. They're lacking in so many areas, Brian. And I know you know this because you wrote the preview. You follow them very closely. It's going to be a transitional year. I think even the most diehard of Lau fans can admit that this year was going to be a transitional year. And in the Libertadores especially, they probably weren't going to make the group stage, let alone maybe even make it past the second round, because I think they were actually going to get Jorge Wilstermann based on how the draw was set up, which would have been a difficult tie in itself. So they can do it. I don't think they'll have enough in them, especially if they play the way that they did, especially when up a man, because that was really disappointing to see.
Yeah, and Christopher, before I go to my opinion, I'll let you go first.
Okay, well, so I would like to give a shout out basically to two of the Bolivian side players. Samperli, I don't know if he was doing so well because the guy that was marking him was so bad, or if he just has a lot of talent. I think that it's someone that we can highlight on the right side, and then also Mesa, I believe is Venezuelan. He if I'm not mistaken, he assisted on both the goals. So I mean, just some interesting players that can really hurt Universitarios defense. You can tell that's what they're lacking in, and I mean, honestly, I want to think, as a Peruvian that Universitario has a chance. But for example, we have Capieta last year, right? They had one on the road, 3-1, and then they come home, and then it's a mess. It's a disaster, and they're at home.
I was at the game. It was a mess. It was a mess.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, I didn't watch like the first 20 minutes of the game, and like I started watching, and I was like, no, they have to have something wrong on the screen. But it was bad. Anyways, I think, unfortunately, we have to be realistic. We just need to kind of like hope that Universitario does well in the Descentralizado tournament. But no, I don't think we can expect much more out of like Copa Libertadores.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna be optimistic, and I'm gonna say lower going to win. That's a bit of a bold prediction, but I can. Oriente Petrolero aren't the strongest, so I can expect them to come here and park the bus. And I think Lau are going to be able to break them down if Sucho clicks anyways. Mm-hmm. I don't have much faith in Chavez, if I'm honest. Now, Oriente Petrolero, one thing about them is that, not just Oriente Petrolero, but Bolivian sides, they often fear the Peruvians, because I've noticed that when the strongest went away to Sao Paulo, to Montevideo Wanderers, they Lau a few years ago, they parked the bus. So it doesn't make sense to me why they would fear us over the Brazilians, but that's just how I feel. That's just how I think that they approach the game to us. Maybe it's a style of play they don't like. Maybe it's the the traditional tiki-taka way, which not all Peruvian clubs play, of course, but maybe that's what they fear. But I don't know. That's just an assumption overall. I could be very wrong, but it's just an assumption. Oh, if you guys don't have any thoughts on that, if you guys don't want to cut in, I'll go on to the next part.
Actually, one thing I do want to mention, shout out to El Tanque for that celebration on the second goal. That was amazing. That was so good. I mean, he got booked for it, and all I was thinking about while watching that was this is peak Libertadores. This is why we love the tournament. It's just craziness like that and just originality like that. That was awesome. Even though Universitario lost because of that goal and probably aren't going through, at least you got to see that celebration. It was awesome.
All right, let's move on to the next part. Let's preview. Well, we kind of already previewed the second leg. We can talk about Melgar now. So Melgar, in Peruvians, in the Libertadores, Peruvians can never be seen as favorites. But I'm calling Melgar favorites on this. If they don't win this, I'll be disappointed because the Chilean league is not that much better than the Peruvian league. It's only a few steps above. And Santiago Wanderers are in the second tier. Yes. So there's really no excuse for Melgar to not win this. I know they have a terrible Libertadores record, but I mean, they have to win this. This is just like, I don't know how far they'll go, but if they don't win this, it'll be a colossal failure in my eyes. Almost as bad as Capital last year because, yeah, like I can excuse a Paraguayan team because Paraguayan league is a lot better than the Peruvian league, but the Chilean league is not that much better than our league. So it's they've got to win this. What do you guys think?
Well, I will say this. Melgar does have the altitude advantage. So that's one aspect of it.
It's not that high, though. Like, you can barely feel it. That's why I think Brazilian teams have won.
I mean, if you're running for 90 minutes and, you're obviously low on match fitness because the league just started, it does play a factor, right? Plus, I mean, you also mentioned the fact that also Wanderers are in the second division. And they, as a result of that, not only did they lose a lot of players, they had to bring in a lot of players too. So you wonder about squad chemistry and all that. I know Melgar lost a couple of key ones themselves. And they're a little bit of a confusing team to get a read on just in terms of how good they'll perform this year. But at least they made some pretty strong reinforcements in some areas. Yeah. I would certainly favor them to progress here. Then again, their draw is pretty tough. They get Santa Fe potentially in that third round, which could be a bit of a tricky test. But certainly in the second round, I would favor them.
Yeah, now Santa Fe are kind of a hit and miss team. Like, you don't know if they can lose to anyone and beat anyone. I expect Santa Fe to win that, but you never know. And one thing that I'd like to happen is I'd like to Melgar to go through their groups. Sure, they'll probably make 0 points again because the group is really, really tough. It'll be River Plate, Emelec, and Flamengo. But I just want to see Flamengo. Well, I don't know if we'll see it because of his ban, but Paulo Guerrero, I'm pretty sure, has never played against a Peruvian team. Like, he didn't play in the league, and I'm pretty sure he'd never played against a team in the Copa Libertadores either. So that will be interesting to see. But, yeah, as my main concern about Melgar is no Omar Fernandez because these new signings are good, but I'm concerned about quality over quantity. If it's there, I'm concerned this might be quantity over quality. Now, I can't say for certain because I haven't seen all these players. I've seen only a few of the new signings, but that's just my main worry because Omar Fernandez really was a master on the ball in this league. Christopher, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Well, for me, I think what's going to be important is actually the match that's going to happen this Friday, which is the Chilean Super Cup between Wanderers and who won the league last year? Colo-Colo, right? Colo-Colo, I think. I mean, the Chilean league has been a mess with this transition too. So I think that's where we're kind of going to get a taste of what this new Santiago Wanderers team is like because from being relegated, they didn't really have a lot of time to make new signings. I know that they've signed a few new forwards, right? That's kind of what they're hoping will carry the team forward. I mean, signing people in the second division it's a whole different ballgame than signings for the first division. So it's going to be interesting to see that. I do agree. I don't think that Melgar is going to make it to the group stage. I think the goal for every Peruvian team is to stay in competition as long as possible, right? And so like I would love to see him go to the group stage, right? But I think it's a more realistic goal to hopefully see him exit the Copa Libertadores and enter the Sudamericana.
That would be good,
yeah. I think that would be a really good goal for Melgar to have because to me, my experience with Santa Fe is kind of what comes to mind is Real Garcilaso going over there for what was it for the quarterfinals of the Copa Libertadores
Yeah.
in 2014, and they get destroyed. And it was Real Garcilaso side that really impressed us in Copa Libertadores. But still, the pressure of playing in Colombia, those guys really like soccer, and they put a lot of pressure in their home matches, right? So, so I mean, that's kind of what my thoughts are for Melgar. I see him beating Santiago Wanderers, like Peter said, with Arequipa and everything being so high. I think they have that advantage if they can put together their new signings into a coherent team. And then my goal for them after that would be to enter Sudamericana. I would be more than happy with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, obviously, they're not going to lose on purpose, but I'm sure you think this as well. But I think that's a good point because if they go to Sudamericana, they have a chance of making it further. Sure, they won't make as much money, but it will definitely work for them to try and get further. It depends on their draw, of course. Now, Melgar is probably the team I have the most faith in this Libertadores because I honestly don't have faith Real Garcilaso or Alianza are going to do much, especially in Alianza and that group that they've got. So I'm not too optimistic about the Peruvians in Libertadores this year. I'm more intrigued to see what the teams in the Sudamericana will do. So if you guys have to jump in, let me know. Peter, do you have anything else to say? Anything else to add?
No, just that I guess I am intrigued to see Biancucci come in and see how he fits into this Melgar side. That's going to be the one player for me to watch, at least in this two-legged tie. And if they can get to that third round and they have any hope of getting into the group stage, I think he's going to be the key man. Because attack-wise, and I guess defensively too, because Santa Maria left as well, they're going to be in a bit of a sticky situation on kind of both sides of the ball. But I feel like he can maybe close that gap a little bit with his playmaking abilities and whatnot.
I think that Santa Maria's replacement is going to be Pablo Fuentes, who is – I don't know if he's 19 or 21. Some sources say he's 19. Others say he's 21. But the point is he's a good defender. He played a few matches last year. He was rotating between him and Santa Maria. Him in the weaker teams, Santa Maria against the stronger teams. And he impressed. I thought he was good. And I think he's one to watch out for in the future. I don't know how far it'll go, but I think that he's definitely an exciting one. And I think that he'll replace Santa Maria well. So, yeah, if we're good, I think we can move on to the next topic, which is we're going to talk about Cristian Cueva, who is the news kind of exploded in the last 2 days since we not really announced, but since we said we would be talking about Cristian Cueva to Boca. And now there's rumors of him going to Saudi Arabia. There's rumors. To put it this way, I'll put it this way, okay? Sao Paulo are not happy with Cueva, and Cueva is not happy with Sao Paulo. The fans are not happy with Sao Paulo. It's that simple. So, what are you, Christopher, first? What are your thoughts on the whole Cueva situation?
Well, the thing is that we know Cueva. We know what he was like, right? I feel like a lot of us thought that somehow Gareca had shown him the way, had enlightened him, and had kind of like made him more mature along the process. But obviously, we're starting to see the old Cueva come back a little bit. You know, the one that was having all this discipline problems and that was throwing tantrums and not being as responsible as he should be. He's unfortunately another one of those cases in Peruvian soccer of people that have talent, but the social aspect or whatever you want to call it gets the best of them sometimes. I think that a good move for Cueva would be Boca, right? Or another team in Argentina or a team in Mexico, especially if he's not going to be able to work out his differences with Sao Paulo and with the fans. To me, going to Asia, even though he's going to make a lot of money, if we really want to have him in the World Cup, that is not to our benefit. I would like to see him stay competitive in a competitive league and be playing and continue to improve instead of just going somewhere kind of like what happened with Farfan last year, where he left and we all thought that he was gone, basically. And he came back to the Russian league, which is not as competitive, you would say, but still, there was somewhere where he could kind of show his skills and show his talent.
Now, before I go over to Peter, we did get a few answers to my question on the I asked basically if he goes from Sao Paulo or he stays. So we got a few answers. Damdamhoff said leaves and sadly to Arabia, which, as Christopher said, is very possible. Chill Kid B, I think that's his name. Says, in my opinion, overrated player, which is debatable. I can definitely see why some would say that. I personally don't think he's overrated. I think on form he's Peru's second or third best player. And K Montalvan 7 said, "Stay. Sao Paulo needs him. It's not his first case of indiscipline," which is very, very true. This happens pretty much every year for him. But yeah, Peter, what are your thoughts on this and the answers as well?
Well, on Kevin's answer, he is totally right. In fact, over the last year, there have been about 3 or 4 incidents with him and Sao Paulo. It started last year when he reported late to preseason. Halfway through the year last year, it turned out that the medical staff was actually mistreating his injuries, and that's why he took so long to recover. That was a massive scandal. Then the third one was he was AWOL from training shortly after Peru qualified for the World Cup. You can totally understand why. He was probably partying for days on end, like many Peruvians were. And now you've got this incident in that he wants to be left out because he's mulling over offers. Now, it sounded complicated around 5, 6 p.m. Eastern time, but it turns out, and this is massive, the Boca links are now pretty much dead because even though he was linked earlier in the week, mainly because Christian Pavon was linked to Arsenal, it turns out he's going to stay, and they've actually signed Emmanuel Reynoso from Talleres, the 22-year-old attacking midfielder who plays in Cueva's position. So that looks to be dead in the water, at least at this point in time. In terms of the Al Hilal links, Globo reported that while the offer was made, it was rejected by Sao Paulo. And they also rejected a $5 million US offer, reportedly. I think that's what the fee was, from Orlando. I want to say it was the last summer, maybe even November, December at the latest. But they signed Josue Colman to be their playmaker. That's now dead as well. So his future's still up in the air. If it was up to me, and if I'm Sao Paulo, I sit him down and say, listen, we know there are issues here. We know you probably want to move. He's been wanting to move for about a year and a half now. If you promise to be good, and I know that is a huge if, but if you promise to behave for the next 6 months, we will sell you if any decent offer comes in, and we'll let you pick the team you want to go to, because Turkish clubs were in for him. A couple of other European teams are monitoring him. I'm sure after the World Cup, his stock is going to go way up, and teams will be banging down Sao Paulo's door trying to sign him. And when he's on form and when he's playing for Sao Paulo, he's unplayable almost. So, I mean, it's not like he's a poor player for them and he's out of form. He's actually very, very solid. So I think that is kind of the way to go here, especially now that all these links seem to be dead at this point in time.
Yeah, agreed. I think that now I'm going to contradict you slightly, Peter. It appears that not all the links are dead. We don't know if the Boca ones are real. It looks unlikely because the Cardona issue is looking to almost be resolved. Cardona went back to training today.
Yeah.
And yeah, it appears Cueva did not travel to, I think it was Mirasol, I think it's a team. Yes. Although you're not really traveling much, you're just going to the same state.
Yeah.
He didn't travel, and nonetheless, I don't know if it's a team decision or if that's something that has to do with the move. Let's hope it has something to do with the move. Let's just hope it's not Al Hilal or, even all due respect, even Orlando. So I prefer him to go to Boca Juniors or a club in Argentina.
Well, it's probably not. It's definitely not going to be Orlando. I can say that they've already got way too many attacking midfielders. I would not want.
They have their designated players too.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't want to come to if I were Cueva, I would not go to MLS. I'd try myself in Europe anyways. I mean, it looks like Sao Paulo at this point is committed to keeping him, because in the same story, Sao Paulo did say in the release that they are working with Cueva to prepare him, and I quote, mentally and physically for the season ahead. So it looks like at this point in time, they're going to try and keep him. What happens with Cueva and how he reacts to this is another story. On the Boca stuff, here's the thing. They've signed Reynoso, Talleres confirmed this. They're keeping Pavon. Where would he fit into the team? You can play him out wide, I guess, but that's not really his best role, right? And I'm sure Gareca wants him playing in that primary number 10 role that he so often thrives in. So I guess it's kind of my question to you guys. Where would he slot in now that all these signings are confirmed, and especially now that Cardona is staying?
Well, honestly, I like him better than Cardona. Cardona is. I used to like him a lot when he played Atlético Nacional and Monterrey, but he's kind of gone off the pace for me in some ways. It's a bit slow. Cueva's quick, and I don't know. I think he's slightly better because Cueva has more of a dynamic game to him, and I'm more of a fan of dynamic players, whereas Cardona seems more of an enganche, at least these days anyway. Cardona was more dynamic when he was playing in Colombia, but yeah, it's kind of it's a weird one because I like both players, but I don't know. Cardona I don't like as much as I used to. Cueva, I think Cueva's unplayable when he plays well. He's one of the best players in South American leagues, in my opinion. But I think that petulance has kind of gone to him in some ways, and his footballing ability as well. Because like they're benching him whenever he comes on, he plays well, but that's not enough. Got to play more minutes, if you ask me.
Well, yeah, and that's the point, right? I mean, you already have one head case in Cardona. He's already used. I mean, he's used to the team. He has the chemistry and whatnot. Why would you want to bring in another quote unquote head case if you already kind of have one? And I mean, Cardona, when he's on, again, like you said, is a very good player. So is Cueva. And this is kind of the dilemma with players like that, is that on one hand, they frustrate you so much. But on the other, when they're actually focused and they're not being petulant, they're so good to watch. Like I remember, and I'm sure everybody will remember this. Remember the 4-3 loss to Chile in World Cup qualifying when he stupidly got sent off for throwing the ball? And I can't remember the player who he threw the ball at. My man and Gary Medel, if I'm not mistaken, which I totally understand. Gary Medel can really frustrate everybody. But that's like a perfect example of just his poor behavior both on and off the pitch. You hope it improves, but again, I just don't know where he goes if he does leave in this window.
Yeah, I'm still kind of optimistic that Boca rumors are real, but that's a big if. You got to see what happens with Cardona in the next couple of days.
For what it's worth, Boca did deny the rumors, but then again, clubs deny rumors all the time, and then they end up making these signings. So take that for what you will.
At least it's not Paulo Guerrero to Boca again. At least it's not giving the rumors.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Every 6 months or every 3 months. My goodness.
It's always Fox Sports who started too. It's fun. It's true. We love them. What else, Christopher? What else we haven't let you talk much. What else do you have to say about Cueva? What else do you have to say about this conversation we're talking about? How would you compare it to Cardona?
Well, obviously, I've been at work for most of the day, so I've been trying to play catch up on all the incoming Cueva information. It looks like every 2 or 3 hours we're getting a new version of what's going on. But I mean, like, it's just all a matter of style and of preference. I think we all have we're kind of what we like to see, and obviously it's going to come down to the coach and what he would think is better for the team. So I think that Cueva does exemplify kind of that what some people like to call, like the Peruvian style, right? The Peruvian waltz, like our name says it, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, I think, like, for example, in Argentina, they appreciate that. In Argentina, they like that. They like to see that soccer. But at the same time, him being this kind of small guy, especially when the game turns rough, he might not be the best fit, at least in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what my thoughts are.
Well, we'll definitely have to see what happens in the next few days, but I think it's time we move on to the next bit. So we didn't get many questions this week. Christopher has one about to get like a press conference, but first let's go to a question Peter received on his Twitter. Peter, what was the question and who asked it?
So Michael Rodriguez at Peruano for Life with a Y asked this question last week. He asked us basically, and I'm going to get the word here, but it was a question on Andre Carrillo based on what happened with Marco Silva and that he got fired by Watford over the weekend after a poor run of results. So, of course, the instant question from a Peruvian point of view is basically what happens with Carrillo now that his so-called biggest backer is no longer at the club. And he asked, what do you think that this means for Carrillo? Will he still stay at Watford now? Hopefully, will he still get playing time under the new manager that comes in, which ended up being Javi Gracia? Javi Gracia, Coach Ruben Kazan, and Coach Carlos Zambrano, so he gets to coach another Peruvian in the Premier League. Now, that is the question. I guess I'll give my quick 2 cents before I throw it out to you guys. Carrillo's form, as I mentioned on the last show, over the past month and a bit, has been really, really good and very promising. I would expect Gracia to continue, playing him until maybe his form drops off. In terms of whether he stays long-term, it's a question to be asked, certainly. It looked like Watford were certainly keen, but I'm sure Marco Silva influenced that. Regardless, I think his club future will still be fine, especially after the World Cup's over. That's going to be a constant theme for a lot of Peruvian players. Oh, the World Cup's going to boost your stock, and you'll find a new club if you need one. So that's my 2 cents. I'll throw it over to you guys. Christopher, you want to give your 2 cents first?
Yeah, let me get started on that. So I think we said Carrillo, right? It took him a little bit to kind of get used to playing in England and kind of getting his form up and kind of finding a spot in the team. I think that now that he is playing well, and especially with this new manager, personally as a new manager, what I would do is I would keep things as they are, at least for a little bit. So I think that for the next little bit, we're still going to see Carrillo playing. For me, what's most important with the World Cup, like right around the corner, and like I have said it before, is that these Peruvian players continue to see action. And I mean, like honestly, it is not good timing for him to move right now. So obviously, he's going to have to give his all and give his best to make sure that he continues to be considered by the new coach.
Yeah, I sent a tweet about this the other day that Marco Silva wants him at Everton, which kind of made me laugh. He's Marco Silva's lapdog. It's the truth. It's the truth. He wants him everywhere. Which I hope the Everton links aren't real because I think Watford's his peak. Because honestly, I've lost faith in Carrillo to ever gain consistency. I think he's gonna stay consistent the rest of his career. I hope I'm wrong, but I've lost faith. So I can't say much. I think he's a good player, but I think he's more of a national team player than a club player. Kind of like Eduardo Vargas, although not as bad as Vargas' case.
Oh my God, not even close.
Vargas has declined more for Chile as well. So I don't know. Could have always been. I don't think it was a fluke because 40 goals for the national team definitely not a fluke.
Oh no,
so,
of course not. Of course not. 40 goals.
That'll be harsh.
One thing I will say on the Everton stuff, that is, I'm sure, categorically false. I mean, I know that Sam Allardyce is definitely a downgrade on Marco Silva, just in terms of the playing style and whatnot. I'm sure what Evertonians want to see. But they also have so much depth out wide. It would be another Benfica situation, like I tweeted last night. And that's the last thing Carrillo wants, especially at his age. He wants to be playing consistently. He's already lost 2 full seasons for that very reason. I'm sure if Watford doesn't keep him or extend his loan, whatever happens, he's going to try and look for a club that gives him the best opportunity to play regularly, obviously, and that's what you obviously want to seek out when you are a footballer.
All right, and before we move on to the Liga MX roundup, Christopher, you did want to tell us about something about Gareca's press conference, which I unfortunately missed. What was it, and what question do you have for us?
Yeah, so well, first of all, I think we can do a little summary of what the press conference. I mean, obviously, Gareca did not surprise. We know how he is, how he does his press conferences, and we know how ridiculous the Peruvian press can also be, right? with this ridiculous, like, really dumb questions sometimes, honestly. But
I'm gonna interrupt you. The best one after the Colombia game was when journalists asked James Rodriguez, "Do you want Peru to go to a World Cup?" That's like you're asking a question expecting an answer. I mean, I'm just giving the stupidest answer, but we're just rambling now. Christopher, you can continue.
Yeah, but anyways, I mean, the good thing about Gareca that maybe Marcarian didn't quite have is that Marcarian, like, the press could push his buttons, and they love to see him lose his cool, right? But Gareca, it kind of gives him just kind of the same answer, no matter how many times they ask. He just kind of gives him the same answer. So I didn't see a lot of surprises from Gareca. I mean, I think what is interesting is Scotland, right? He didn't want to confirm it. Mm-hmm. But there is big rumors that Scotland's going to be the farewell match rival for Peru and Lima. So my question to you guys is Scotland a worthy rival right now?
Well, it depends because there's one thing that could be an issue. How many Scottish-based players are going to make the trip? Because you think about I don't know about Rangers, but you think about Celtic, who are definitely going to be in the Champions League. And how many of those are going to make the trip? Because they're going to be playing. They're going to be training for the Champions League like 2 weeks before. So I don't think they're going to Lima. I think there's going to be more Premier League based players or Championship based players.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. In terms of whether Scotland's a worthy opponent, I mean, let's kind of take it for what it is. They're playing Croatia essentially as like a warm-up for Denmark. They're facing Iceland as like a warm-up for Australia. Does that mean Scotland's the warm-up for France? Like,
I think there's going to be more friendlies. I think this is just the home sending off because, I mean, what other choices do you have? You're not going to get a European to come to Lima only to go back to Russia for 15 hours on a plane. The only other viable option was the Netherlands, and I don't think they accepted. So
yeah, well, here's the other interesting part.
I think Scotland is kind of we'll take what we can get, and then we'll play other friendlies.
Yeah, I mean that's. I mean, after all, you want to get your confidence up. You're sending off, or you're having a send off with the home fans in attendance. You want to give them some confidence. Scotland, they're without a manager at the moment, a permanent manager. Michael O'Neill just rejected them. And they're kind of indecisive in terms of where they want to go. They got some decent players. Lee Griffiths scores lots of goals. Kieran Tierney's one to watch for the future, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think the opponent really matters. But what I do find interesting, though, in terms of Gareca not confirming it or not, the Scottish FA on their official Twitter actually said, hey, this is our pre-UEFA Nations League schedule. And Peru is listed there in Lima. So the fact that the Scottish FA confirmed it, but Gareca isn't, is a bit strange. And I'm actually kind of surprised the Peruvian media didn't catch wind of that, unless they did and maybe just glossed over it. I don't know.
No, they did. They noticed the tweet, right? And that's where most everyone, because the rumors were up in the air, right? That Scotland was probably going to be the rival. The Scottish FA comes out and they say that, and Gareca's response was only like, I mean, I don't want to say anything because until we don't put the signature down on paper, it's not official. That was his response, which is logical. So he's basically telling us it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just I don't want to get ahead of myself because I mean, stuff does happen. I mean, we've seen stuff like that happen in the past, and also there is that nostalgia factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
From us playing Scotland in the World Cup and the wonderful. Free kick and all that. So, I mean, I don't want to talk down. I don't want to talk down on Scotland or whatever. But we kind of need, some like a decent rival, someone that we can hopefully with Peru will be playing well, that we can score a few goals on, so that everybody's happy when the plane takes off for Russia, right? So I think it's going to be a good match. I think it's going to be an interesting match. For sure, there's that nostalgia factor, like I was saying. And
certainly. I think that it could be a decent opponent, but again, we'll have to see what squad they send to Lima because it's very far. But thankfully, they're not going to the World Cup, so they're accepted because they're not going to Peru to go all the way back to Russia. They're just going back to Scotland. Still a very long trip, but they're also going to Mexico City, so I think they're going to Mexico City afterwards. So flight's going to be slightly shorter. But anyways, let's move on to the last part of the podcast. With the Liga MX Peruvians. Now, we're going to pick a few of them. We're not going to pick all of them. Let's start with the Raul Ruiz, the one we started with last week. And I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of afraid this is going to be a season where it's going to kind of drop in form. Now, Monarcas, he's always been a great scorer for Monarcas because Monarcas is not exactly a team that score lots of goals. They rely on Ruiz for the goals. Mostly, the system revolves around Sosa making saves, Achillier being a rock at the back, and Diego Valdez creating the chances, and of course, Ruiz scoring the goals. So it's kind of like, I don't want to say straightforward, but it's not the most exciting tactic in the world. And that's my main concern is that he's had his 3 seasons of glory, and this season, this Clausura is going to kind of decline. But that's just a worry. Again, I'm very hoping I'm wrong, but we'll see what happens. I think that he might get unlucky this part of the season because even the Apertura, he scored lots of penalties. But again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm just being pessimistic and unnecessarily pessimistic. What do you guys have to say about that? Peter, you go first.
Sure. So first of all, the last game against Santos Laguna, you kind of see the negative of playing that kind of tactic. Santos Laguna just simply closed down the Ruiz. The service into him was terrible. even though he was working really hard off the ball as he often does. He just couldn't really get any sort of space, and he struggled as a result, and that's totally fair enough. In terms of whether or not he will struggle, I mean, it's still early in the season. I think when you should start to actually properly worry is when he just becomes completely invisible in matches. He's just very sloppy on the ball. He's not making those same runs that he always does. Basically, if he's not as lively in games. Because even though he did score a lot of penalties in the Apertura in 2017, he was still getting himself into great positions and even won some of those penalties as well, which is just as good as scoring them in some cases.
Yeah, he was great in the first match. Or was it the first match? It was the one they won 1-0. I think it was against Puebla. He was great in that match.
Yeah, so that was, I think, the first one.
I hope he keeps putting performances like that. But
yeah,
he was lucky to not score a second. But
that's the key.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried. I'm kind of worried about just how he's had 3 great seasons. Is he going to decline this season, or is he going to continue scoring loads of goals? Is he going to continue fighting for the Golden Boot? And I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But I'm a bit pessimistic for this season. I feel like he's going to get back to scoring the next. I feel like this season is going to be kind of like his bad run of form. It's just something I feel. It's not a prediction. It's just like I feel this is going to happen. Maybe next season he'll go back to scoring. But then again, Dano Moreno, for me, Rudy is better than Dano Moreno. Dano Moreno never dropped his form in Mexico, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so a few thoughts on Ruidiaz there. I think that part of his success this season, this Clausura season in Mexico, is going to be up to how creative the coach can be, in my opinion. Because I mean, he's played long enough in Mexico. I think he's made a name for himself, and that probably also means that the other teams are being a little bit more they're being extra careful with him, right? They know who he is, and so especially when he's kind of alone on top and he's kind of trying to take the team forward and being the killer that he is on the box, other teams are like they just did are going to start figuring him out and figuring out how to neutralize him. So if the coach can figure out how to bring kind of freshen up this team, kind of freshen up Monarca somehow, so that they don't continue to figure out Ruidiaz, then hopefully he will continue to have a good season. Good enough for him to move to another club, we had said last week.
Yeah, I still have faith that Ruidiaz will definitely end up at a big club in Mexico. I have no doubts there, or at least I have no doubts that he'll go down in Mexico as not a legend, but maybe like one of the best goal scorers in recent times, maybe like a Salvador Cabañas, something like that. So I have no doubt that will happen at some point. I'm just worried. I'm just thinking, when is this going to be his bad run? And I'm thinking it could be now, but we'll see what happens. I'm just simply believing in too many. I'm simply believing in the wrong fate here. So we'll see what happens. And speaking of which, Ruidiaz is not going to be the only one who's going to back goals. If Raison Noval gets playing time again, he'll definitely join him up. But let's make a segue to Raison Noval, who got sent off 2 minutes into his debut. In my opinion, it was the right sending off because, I mean, you could argue it was a bit harsh. You could argue it was harsh because it was 2 minutes into his debut, but at the end of the day, swinging your leg around like that, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah, I mean, he caught him in the nether regions, like, with his studs up. Like, you can't, I mean, like you, Brian, I mean, we were recording another show at the same time this was happening. I could feel both of us face palming at the exact same time when you read that out. I was just like, oh my God, just awful. I mean, the bad part is that now he's suspended. He's going to lose, not another opportunity to regain some minutes and whatnot. And I think you also said this, Brian, as well. He might be one of the leading candidates in terms of the Peruvians who could actually head back to Peru by the end of the Clausura. You would hope it doesn't happen because I think Sandoval is a very talented player. But if he can't get minutes, he can't get minutes. I mean, there's nothing you can really do about it.
Christopher, what are your thoughts on Sandoval?
Yeah, to be honest with you, they had that video all over Facebook. I must have watched a replay of that kick like 100 times, and it was actually pretty brutal. It was a little bit strange, honestly. At first, I honestly thought I was like, this ref is exaggerating. Like, no way. But after seeing it like 50 times, you're like, yeah, that must have really hurt. Right? That must have really hurt the poor guy. So, but anyways, I don't know. I think Monarcas needs him. I think that he still has a place in the team. Hopefully, that they will really give him a second chance. Uh, and yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's much to say yet. I think it's a little too early. Hopefully, like what I expect is the coach to give him that second chance, and hopefully, this is just nothing but a little something that we can laugh about, in a few months.
Shout out to Peruvian Pepper who said Rivias surely should move at least to a bigger club in Mexico in the chat, which we would agree with. I'm pretty sure we would all agree with. So next we're gonna talk about Pedro Aquino. We have 10 minutes left, so let's talk about another player who was brilliant over the weekend. Well, not another player, but a player who was brilliant over the weekend. I thought it was excellent. I only saw the second half of the Lobos game, but I thought it was roaming in areas where he's not often known for. He was shooting at net, and he was actually getting close to scoring a goal. Some of his shots they weren't the most dangerous, but they weren't like easy shots for the keeper either. So I thought it was, and he was great in the midfield. He was winning back the ball a lot, and yeah, despite Lobos losing yet again, I thought it was back to his old self because I was kind of disappointed with this start in his first two games, but I could sigh some relief because that was a good performance. Peter, what do you think? I know you had some thoughts on Pedro Aquino. You saying you Peruvians abroad in the Peruvian Waltz.
Mhm.
It was good. So you thought, I'm pretty sure you think the same sentence as I do.
Yeah, I watched the entire game, and he's now getting into that territory where I kind of have this like tier of Peruvians abroad who are sort of like untouchable, quote unquote, in that they will always produce consistently. And Aquino is very much in that tier for me now. Even when the team plays poorly, or even when he is maybe having a bit of an off day, he still manages to give you something. And given how overrun Lobos were in midfield, I thought he had a tremendous showing yet again. His passing was crisp as usual. Even when he had a bad pass or got dispossessed, he would hustle back immediately and win back possession for the team. The question for me now is, I mean, we obviously know that he settled in well at Lobos, and that is massive because when he first got there, that was the question. Can he settle in relatively quickly in Mexico? He did, and now he's immense. The question now is, how soon does he get into Monterrey's first team? Because I think personally, looking at that team, how direct they play, him and Jonathan Gonzalez, that would be just a mouth-watering midfield duo to have, well, midfield trio, I guess, along with maybe, let's say, Carlos Sanchez or someone, who knows. I think by the end of this clausura, because that's when his loan ends, we might be talking about a player who's not only played for Monterrey, but maybe even then getting on the radar of European clubs because he has been that good over the past, what's it been now, 6 months? So.
Yeah, and what I love about this is that Pedro Aquino is showing how much, well, not how much depth do we have, but how we have more depth in the midfield now than we did 5 years ago. Yeah. 5 years ago, the best holding midfielder we had was just Amir Bayon. So this is certainly a step up, and it's shown because we're in the World Cup now. So that's definitely better now. But okay, Christopher, any thoughts on Pedro Aquino?
No, I think I would agree with everything that Peter was saying. I didn't really have the chance to look at the Lobos game last week, but the comments that I have read online have been fairly positive. Looks like he's doing pretty well in the team, and yeah, I too think that it would be nice to see him in Monterrey.
One of the most underrated midfielders in the league, although the Mexicans who have seen Lobos have really appreciated how good he's been. Mm-hmm. So before we go to Luis Advíncula, if we have time for him anyways, I think we should talk about Pedro Galese, who was unable to avoid a loss because of his defense, but I thought he was massive on the day. He looked like a player that was much better than Veracruz. Like he was making as much saves as possible. The 2 goals, there's nothing he could have done there.
No.
Both of them were, well, not really off corners, but like one of them was a play that started from a corner, and the other one, I'm pretty sure it was a corner if I remember correctly. So, what do you make of Galese's performance, Peter? Were you impressed by it?
I was. I've been impressed with his performances pretty much since he got there. I know that he got a bad reputation from the Mexican media because of a couple of howlers he committed. That happens to every goalkeeper. So to me, that was overblown. At the end of the day, he's a number 1 goalkeeper for one of the top nations in the world, right? I mean, they're at the World Cup. You could argue they are like a, maybe somewhere in like that 10th to 16th bracket in terms of like the best teams in the World Cup. He's a good goalkeeper, right? And he's definitely Veracruz's most valuable asset in my eyes. He just has no help in front of him. This is the problem. This is why I think they might get relegated. They're already in a bit of a hole. They're in trouble. Now, the one silver lining for him and for Veracruz as well, Christian Ramos made the bench for the first time. That is a player who I think could really help them defensively because they are very porous back there.
Yeah, well, Ramos could be a bit inconsistent, but I agree that it's definitely a step from what they have right now. And let's well, I'll go to Christopher first. Christopher, what do you make of Ellis' performance if you got to catch this one?
What was that?
What do you make of Ellis' performance if you got to catch this one or saw highlight reels? What do you make of it?
Yeah, like you said, it's funny, right? Because for a goalkeeper with poor defense, I mean, it kind of really shows the quality of the goalkeeper. And I mean, I've been saying it for months. I think that Veracruz is way too small of a club for him. To me, I would love to have seen him move. We know we had his injury. He had his injury and stuff like that. That he was off for a whole season. But honestly, like since the day that he played against Argentina with like a broken finger still, and he was able to just destroy, like just defend that all those shots like crazy. Like honestly, I think he deserves a bigger team, and so that's kind of my hope for him.
I would love to see him.
All the Peruvians at Veracruz.
I would love to see him at a club like Club America or Boca. You don't have to play in Europe to be a great player. Mm-hmm. I think that those clubs are enough. A club like Club America, Boca, even Flamengo, which is a huge club. Yeah. So that'll be good. And Luis Advíncula, Peter, I know you were a bit positive about this performance. Didn't really notice him as much, but I did think he was all right on the weekend. He's definitely better in the first two matches. What do you think?
Yeah, he was a lot better. That is certainly a positive. His first half was a lot better than his second half, but I think that can be attributed to Lobos trying to expose the central channels when they were trying to fight back from their deficit. I mean, first half he looked like his usual self, bombing up and down the flank, tracking back on defense. The odd time he didn't come back, like all the way into basically towards his own box. But Chuca's Eric Aguirre was getting all sorts of space and freedom, and he punished Lobos on several occasions. But when Advíncula was actually marking him, Aguirre couldn't get past him. And that's not an easy task because Aguirre is a very tricky attacking player. So still not quite back to his regular form, but certainly very encouraging based on what was seen on Saturday.
Right, and we have one more question that we're going to answer very briefly because we're almost out of time. Aquino is vastly improved in Mexico. He should be like a star example of going abroad to get into the national team picture. If he gets into Monterrey midfield here, if he gets into the Monterrey team, he replaces to Yotun, but he might replace Tapia because he's more similar to Tapia than Yotun. But it's hard to say because Tapia seems to be a favorite amongst many, not just Gareca. So it's definitely going to be hard. I'm not sure if he's going to shoot or replace him. I personally have always been a bigger fan of Aquino than Tapia, but they're both very good players, so it's hard to say. You could always rotate between them, and I guess you could rotate them. I guess you could play Aquino in the France game, play a midfield of three, but I don't know. It's hard to say. I think that Aquino should be like a star example of who should he move abroad. Is there a spot for him in the tactical place? And I'm going to say no for now, as much as I hate to say it. What do you guys think?
100% I would agree that he could be the example, but this is the problem. Tapia's played well. He doesn't really play the Yotun role. I guess he could, but he wouldn't be as strong if he did. Like you said, if they go to a midfield three or they play with just more in the central areas, certainly an option. The problem is, again, like you said, who does he replace at this point in time? Because consistency is also a big factor here. And Tapia, I think, is the glue that holds the team together. And if you take him out, as good as Aquino is, you might struggle a little bit with the camaraderie.
Possibly. Well, anyways, we've run out of time. We're not going to talk about Lexi Gomez because he's not played in the last week. Roberto Villamarin has not made his debut yet. And Avila, as good as he's been, we've run out of time. We'll be able to talk about him. But got an assist, got a goal. So he started off well. There's not much else to say. He started off well. He's even looked decent in the build-up play. So that's about as much as we can say about Avila right now. So thank you for listening or watching, whatever your preference is. But this will be on iTunes in the next 2 days. And make sure you tune in next week on the same day, possibly the same time. We could do 10. Depends on our schedules. But yeah, make sure you tune in next week. I'm Brian Birdie. I'm B_Birdie98 on Twitter. Christopher, what is your Twitter?
I'm Christopher Viscardo, and it's VIZ_FC.
And how are you, Peter?
As always, at Galindo PW.
All right. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week. Make sure you tune in.